Now before we start training, I want you to learn and understand some of the anatomy of the core muscles. The core muscle is made up of a group of muscles that support and enclose our lower pelvic lumbar back area. So the first one is the transverse abdominal muscle, and where it runs is it's transverse, so it runs around the body in a circle motion, and it attaches into the back of our back through our spine, the top of our hips, and our spinal joints. Now the chief function of the core is to support the spinal stability when we move. So being a circular muscle, when you contract it, when a muscle contracts, the 2 points come closer together. So when the circle muscle contracts, the circle gets smaller. So the bonuses of the transverse abdominal muscle is that your stomach will flatten, your waistline will come in a little bit smaller, and the chief bonus or the chief function is that it will support and stabilize the low spine. With good stability, we then have good posture. So the transverse abdominal muscle I refer to as the deep core muscle throughout the program. Now our other core muscles involve the rectus abdominal muscle, which runs from our sternum and our ribs down to our pelvis and our pubic bone. Now when this muscle contracts, it will bring the ribs closer to the pubic bone. I can't do it on this one because he's a bit stiffened. So that's what that does. This is the muscle that many people use when they do sit-ups. It also, when we bend backwards, it will allow us to go backwards. It controls the movement of our ribs away from our pelvis. So that's back bending. All right. Now, if we are standing or lying even, and we have our ribs fixed, the rectus abdominis lower part will tilt the pelvis forward. Again, it brings the pubic bone closer to the sternum, and what it does then is tilts our pelvis. So it will tilt our pelvis backwards, but bring our pubic bone forwards and upwards. So that's another one of the core muscles. Further to that, we have our oblique abdominal muscles, and of course oblique means they run from one side diagonally across to the other. They're part of the core that supports the abdomen. It also allows us to rotate. So the three abdominal muscles are part of the core. Now going to the back, the multifidus muscle. Now it's not many people understand or report or even work on this muscle. The multifidus muscle runs, it's an extensor of our spine, so what it does do, it runs across small segments, maybe 1 or 2 or 3, the segments of it, and it extends the spine. It extends just segments of the spine. So it's called multifidus, there's many of them, and it runs over small segments of the spine. It's a long skinny muscle. It's responsible for stabilising the joints at a local level. Now the next muscle that we're going to involve in the train with this core program is the pelvic floor. Now the pelvic floor runs from the tailbone through to the sides of our pelvis, and it acts as a sling for the under part of our body. And if you read in the manual, when it's weak, you know, we can have incontinence, we can wet ourselves when we cough, we can have dripping, fecal or urine incontinence. So the pelvic floor supports the internal organs. So it is a major part of the core muscle, often damaged in childbirth, obviously. So again, we're going to incorporate training the pelvic floor as part of the core training. So for good core stability, we're going to look at each of these muscles and test them. I'm not going to test your pelvic floor, but we're going to show you how to use it. And then we're going to go further than that and train you how to strengthen them, and then how to use them in your daily life. So that's what the core muscles are. Read about them in the manual and learn a bit about them, understand where they are and how they work, and then we'll be able to go further. So we'll see you in the next video.